everyone, it's Leela from Miss Kiss Creations. Welcome back to my channel. Today's video is going to show you how you do a manly tumbler. The tumbler we're going to be doing is this beautiful diamond plated tumbler. You're going to need a stainless steel tumbler. The tumbler that I have today is a 22-ounce tumbler from the stainlesssteeldepot.com. You're also going to need some 91% alcohol, some paper towels or clean rags to wipe your tumbler down with, a pair of scissors, some 631 or non-permanent vinyl, your weeding tools, and this hammered spray paint from Rust-oleum. I did purchase this from Lowe's in the spray paint section. For this tumbler, I went ahead and I created my own template. The way I created my template is using the Cricut Design Space and having my Cricut Explore Air2 cut my file. If you don't have a cutting machine like the Cricut or Silhouette, you can always go online to see if somebody is actually selling the template itself and already cut on vinyl. I would recommend looking at Etsy first, and if you don't see anything there, try to search the web a little deeper, and maybe you can find somebody who sells the pre-cut vinyl piece. You will also be needing epoxy, part A and part B. The epoxy that I use is Amazing Clear Cast. I will also be wearing a face mask to protect me from the fumes whenever I go to mix and apply my epoxy on my tumbler. And like always, whenever you are working with inks, sprays, epoxy, I always do recommending you wearing your Nitrile Gloves. I will have a very detailed list of materials that I will be using for this tumbler, so please be sure to look below for all of the materials that I use today. I will also be taking the time to go step by step on how I created my diamond plate template. So if you're already familiar on how to create your own templates, you can go ahead and fast forward through the template making part. Let's go ahead and get started. So the very first thing that I'm going to do is wipe my tumbler down with 91% alcohol. I am going to be wearing gloves for this. I do store my 91% alcohol in a little makeup bottle just to make it easier for me. Again, it needs to be 91% alcohol. I'm not going to be sanding this tumbler. I'm not going to be spray painting a base coat. I'm just going to simply wipe down my tumbler with the 91% alcohol. You want to make sure you're focusing on the rim of your tumbler, because a lot of times the epoxy likes to repel from the rim on the rim of the tumbler. So make sure you're giving that a good wipe down with the alcohol. Also, you want to make sure you're wiping down the bottom. So don't forget the bottom of your tumbler. Again, this tumbler came as is. The only thing I did was take the lid off. I put my tumbler arm inside of my tumbler, and then I wiped it down with 91% alcohol. That is all I'm doing with this tumbler. For the next step of this process is I want to go ahead and make my diamond plate template. So I went ahead and I went to Google. I typed in diamond plate SVG. So an SVG, in other words, it's also a cut file or vector file. SVGs are meant to be cut, not printed. So if you see this one right here, this file isn't meant to be cut. There's only one layer of this file. So if I went ahead and I uploaded this to Cricut Design Space, when I go to cut this entire piece of the diamond plate will be cut out. Cricut Design Space will treat this like a PNG, and it's not going to cut the diamonds within the image. So again, I wanted to choose a cut file or an SVG file. So I went ahead and I chose something similar to this. What I did next was I right-clicked it, I saved picture as, and then I saved it underneath a folder. I labeled it diamond plate SVG or something similar. I went ahead and I saved the file. Once I had the file saved to my desktop, I went ahead and I switched back to my Cricut Design Space. I'm going to go ahead and upload the file by browsing, and there's my image. I'm going to upload it as complex. And then what I want the Cricut Design Space to do is only cut around the diamonds. So I'm going to select my, my select and erase tool. I'm gonna go ahead and select the white background, and since there's only 2 colors on this file, this is going to be very simple. I'm just gonna click in the background, and now everything that is checkered blue and white, that's what the Cricut Design Space is going to cut around. So the Cricut Design Space is gonna cut around all of these diamonds. It's also gonna cut this line here, but we're gonna go ahead and get rid of that line as well. So I'm going to undo that option, and now it's white. So if I would have left this image as white, what would have happened is my Cricut Design Space would only cut around this image and around this line. So if I go to put this in the machine, the Cricut Design Space will only cut a rectangle. That's it. It's not going to cut inside of this image. It's not going to cut all of these diamonds, and you want the machine to cut the diamonds. So again, I'm just going to click the white space, and now it's going to cut within. So I know a lot of people, when they work with their cutting machine or Cricut Design Space, they do add a rectangle or a square around their image. This sometimes saves vinyl, or it saves a cutting time after it cuts. I don't like to keep that around there. I like to make it as clean as possible. So I'm just going to trim that part out and kind of crop it using my crop tool. And then it's going to look like that. So now the machine is only going to cut the diamonds. So if I would have kept that the way it was, like so, the machine's going to not only cut the diamonds, but it's also going to cut the rectangle. So you're still going to get the same result. It's just going to cut both. Whichever one you would like to choose is up to you. I'm going to keep it like this because this is how I'm used to doing it. Then I'm going to go ahead and click continue. I'm going to save it as diamond plate. I've already saved one, so I'm going to save it as diamond plate 2. Save. And I'm going to click it to upload it into my design space. So this is my canvas. So now I have my template. I'm now wanting to create my template to fit around my tumbler. So what I did was I took my 22-ounce tumbler right here, and then if you see that this tumbler, I don't know if you can see on camera, but this tumbler is skinnier at the bottom and it gets bigger towards the top. So I measured the diameter around the top of the tumbler, because if I measure the diameter on the bottom, it's only going to measure the smallest side of the tumbler. I want the largest because I'd rather the design overlap the bottom than not be enough for the top. It's about 11 inches. It's a little less than 11. I'm trying to get it on camera, but it is a little less. So I'm gonna make my design a little more than 11 inches just so I have more to play with. And then once I measured around the tumbler, I'm gonna also measure from top to bottom of the tumbler. And that's about 7.5 inches. So I'm going to make my design about 11.5 to 8 inches. So the machine can cut that so I can have more than less of my cut. Now going back to my Cricut Design Space, I'm gonna go ahead and just make this design bigger by just dragging it out. And it looks like it's gonna be 11.2 by 9.1. I'm gonna now change it to no fill, meaning I'm gonna want this to be cut. And then I'm going to make it, and this is going to fill my entire mat. This is a detailed cut, so this cut took about 8 to 12 minutes for it to be completed on my Cricut Explore Air2. So just have some patience with that. A reminder, this cut is going to be a template, meaning you are going to place this on your tumbler as a template, and then you're wanting it to be removed. So you do not want to use 651 or permanent vinyl. You want to use 631 or temporary vinyl. Again, you're wanting to use temporary or 631 vinyl. You do not want the vinyl to be permanent or 651. You want to be able to pull this template up whenever you are finished with the design or when you're finished spray painting. It doesn't matter what color you use. I just had this on hand, so I went ahead and I used this turquoise or teal color. So again, this is 631 vinyl. I did purchase my vinyl from 651vinyl.com. I will be posting that in my description below. I'm now going to cut the design and show you a little portion of it and fast forward it just to make the video go a little quicker for y'all. So my design has been cut. The machine's cut my design. Now I'm going to peel the vinyl off of my, my cutting mat. I'm going to cut the excess vinyl from my design. Now I'm gonna want to weed my design. Now there's two ways to weed this. You can either weed this by taking the excess off and leaving the diamonds on the paper, or you can weed each diamond off of the paper, leaving the excess or background down on the paper. I hope that makes sense. What I'm going to do is weed the background up and leave the diamonds on the paper. And after I do that, I'll try to explain the other way of how you could possibly do it, and it'll still look fine. One tip that I have while weeding intricate designs is kind of press down the small areas of your design. So I only have the diamonds, so I'm going to press down the diamonds. But whenever you are weeding like cursive lettering, or if you have like dots or periods or commas, I always take my weeding tool, and before I weed, I kind of rub down the areas that are kind of stubborn and likes to come up while I weed. So now that this is actually a bigger design and it's not small lettering, I'm just going to take my squeegee tool and I'm just going to go across my vinyl, kind of pressing down the design or the diamonds. So whenever I go to pick up or weed the excess background, it's going to most likely lay better and not want to pull up while I'm weeding. Now that I've pressed down the diamonds, I'm now going to take my weeding tool and weed the background or the excess vinyl from the design. And if you can tell, the diamonds kind of lay flat. I did pick up one here, but that's not an issue. So make sure you aren't picking up all of them. And I kind of pull at an angle. I pull at an angle, and that kind of helps the design pull apart easily. Anytime I weed a design with my vinyl, I make sure I keep the excess vinyl intact. When I first started doing this, I would ball this up immediately, and then I realized that I left a comma in here and I have to go scrape it out and try to get it from the garbage. Then usually it wouldn't work, so I would have to recut the entire design or half of the design just for that one comma or period. So I do keep this just stuck to my desk until I'm completely finished, because right now this design might look complete, but whenever I go to apply it to the tumbler, I might see that I missed a diamond. And it could just be a simple fix of just pulling a diamond from my excess vinyl and just placing it back on the design. I hope that all makes sense to you. Again, I pulled up the background of this design, so when I go to spray paint this design, the diamonds are going to be what is the stainless steel, and the background is going to be the spray paint. If I would have pulled up the diamonds itself and not left the diamonds on the paper, when I go to spray paint, the background would be the stainless steel and the diamonds would be spray painted. Again, I think either way looks fine. I chose the easier way, but you can also choose the other way, whichever way you want to go about your tumbler. I'm going to now take my transfer tape and I'm going to lay a piece of transfer tape over my template or design. I'm kind of laying it from the edge and then kind of flatten it out towards the other edge. That's how I lay mine. I try to kind of roll it just to avoid having any bubbles or creases inside of my transfer tape. I'm going to take my squeegee tool and then just go ahead and press down the design so the design will stick to the transfer tape when I go to peel the tape up. I'm now going to take my tumbler that I have wiped down with my 91% alcohol. If you feel like you've touched it since then or have oils that you transferred from your hands to your tumbler from wiping it down 15-20 minutes ago, go ahead and wipe it down again. There's no harm in doing that. You can wipe this down 100 times and you'll be okay. I do have an old towel down. This is just for the tumbler to kind of be secure so it's not rolling around my table whenever I go to apply the decal. I'm now going to pull up my transfer tape, and your diamonds should pull up right with your transfer tape. If your diamonds do not pull up with your transfer tape, you need to go put your tape back down and squeegee your design down and apply a little bit more pressure whenever you're squeegeeing your design. For my next step, I'm going to take my vinyl and place it on the tumbler. Now, this is the reason why I made the design a little bigger, because there's room for error. And I already know I'm going to be making some mistakes with this. So I'm just going to place it down, bending it, and then rolling it down around the tumbler. So I'm kind of focusing on my right side first, and I'm rolling the tumbler because I'm trying to avoid air bubbles. And thankfully this is 631 vinyl. So if you do make little mistakes, you can always peel this up whenever you're finished with it. So if I go ahead, I'm like, oh, I don't want this to be placed down, I can go ahead and peel this right back up because this is 631. So if you feel there's bubbles in here, just go ahead and lift it back up. I'm trying to do this properly and still get on the camera. I have to say that in all my videos, just to remind y'all how hard this is and still try to get the right angle for y'all. All right, so it looks like this is met in the middle. It is a little crooked, but that'll just be the back of the tumbler. Let me show y'all. So you see how it's laid. So I'm now going to take my scissors and I'm just going to cut across here just so it can lay flat and not overlap each other, like so. Now this is my excess vinyl. Do not throw this away. Do not throw away this these diamond plates or the diamond design. All right, so I'm going to peel this up. Again, this is 631. It's temporary, so it's very forgiving. I'm gonna peel this up and kind of lay it a little flatter here because I don't want any bubbles in this tape. I know I'm just gonna be peeling up the tape, but that's just how I am. All right, so here's the design. Honestly, this looks really cute the way it is without being spray painted. Now what I want to do is focus on this overlap. So I am going to cut this so the transfer tape isn't overlapping. Again, keeping that excess diamonds because I might use that here in a second. So now you see that there's the piece of transfer tape. It's not overlapping at all. I am now going to press down the design on the tumbler. I want all of these diamonds to stay on the tumbler. So make sure you press it down very, very well. Now that you feel like you've pressed down your design or your diamonds, you're now going to peel up your transfer tape. I did press down my design off camera, so I did have to put some elbow grease into that. So make sure you know it's gonna take some time. I went around and I actually rubbed down every piece of diamond around the tumbler because I want every single diamond to stick down. And I do not want to peel it up. So I'm going to go ahead and fast forward this part, taking off the transfer tape, and then I'll be back for the next step. All of my transfer tape is off of my tumbler, and again, y'all, I really like this. This is really cute. Go ahead and just epoxy this and call it a day. This is adorable. I like it. Okay, no, but really. So I'm going to find the back, and it's actually hard to find the back of the tumbler. So you see here, there's some bare spots. This is perfectly fine, but my brain, this isn't acceptable in my eyes. So I hope you can see that there's no diamonds here. This is the reason why I told you to keep the excess diamonds from your transfer tape. So I'm gonna go ahead and place the diamond or the tumbler down. I'm now going to take some diamonds from my transfer tape and I'm just going to peel them. You can use your backward scissors is what I call them. Or you can use your hands, whichever one you feel more comfortable with. And I'm just going to randomly place the diamonds on the tumbler just to kind of fill in that bare spot there. So this diamond's cut off. Let me show you. There's a diamond right there that's cut off. So what I'm going to do is peel that up and just place a whole diamond there. Same with this one. I'm going to peel up that, and I'll most likely peel up that. Just to make it look like this isn't the seam. I know this is going to be the seam or the back of the tumbler, but I just want it to flow and blend a little better than what's happening now. I went ahead and I added some diamonds in some spots, and you probably can't even notice where I added them, which is good, which means that it's flowing. And I also added some spots up here. So I like whenever designs kind of run off towards the top of the tumbler or the bottom. So I added some diamonds on the bottom as well there. I don't know if you can see that or if the camera is making that clear. I had a lot of extra diamonds and I still have more diamonds left over. I'm not gonna get too crazy, so I'm gonna leave it as is. I also wanna note that I am using my bare hands, meaning I do have oil that's coming from my hands and it is going on the tumbler. I am trying to touch the tumbler as little as possible, but for anybody who uses lotion or anything similar, hand cream or anything, before you do this, make sure you take some dish soap or some hand soap and just wash your hands so you don't have any chances of the lotion or the hand cream coming off of your hands and going towards the tumbler or on the tumbler. Realistically, you are going to touch your tumbler with your bare hands, so it's okay. It's not going to make a huge difference. You can use gloves while doing this step, but it just doesn't work for me. So just remember to wash your hands, especially if you've lotion or oil before, or lotion or creamed, before you touch your tumbler or do this step. Another random tip that I've mentioned in some of my previous videos, this transfer tape is reusable. It is reusable until the stickiness is no longer sticky. So I go ahead and I put this on one of my metal legs on my table and I use it for next time. I use this transfer tape about 2 to 4 times after I've used it once. So go ahead and keep it I'll probably end up taking off these diamonds, or I'll just cut the diamonds out and use this transfer tape. For my next step, I'm now going to spray paint my tumbler using my Rust-oleum hammered spray paint. Unfortunately, I won't be able to show this part on camera, but I do have a setup being built right now for me to show you my spray paint part on camera. So please be patient with that. In due time, you will see how I spray paint my tumblers. Just like any other spray paint, you want to go ahead and shake this bottle up or this can up, and then you're going to spritz. So I am about 10 to 12 inches away from my tumbler, and I'm just going to spritz and spray in small areas around the tumbler. So I'm not going to excessively spray close to my tumbler. This is going to have the spray paint get caked on the tumbler, and it's gonna have the tumbler run, or the spray paint run down the tumbler. So less is more. You can always add more. So make sure you're about 10 to 12 inches away, and you're just doing spritz around the tumbler just like this. So I'm just close just to show you how I'm doing it, but you realistically want to be further away from the tumbler. I'll be right back whenever this is spray painted. I went ahead and I spray painted my tumbler with the Rust-oleum, and I let it completely dry. It took about 30 to 45 minutes to have this completely dry. So just keep that in mind. Be patient with it. Do not peel up the vinyl until your tumbler is completely dried. So now for the more tedious part. Now we're wanting to pull up this vinyl. So we're wanting to pull up every piece of vinyl and diamonds that you see around the tumbler. So I'm gonna go ahead and peel up a couple, and then I'll go ahead and either fast forward this part or do this off camera. The way I do this is I just take my weeding tool and I kind of pick at the vinyl, and then whenever you see like the piece coming up, you can take your fingers and pull it off, or you can use the weeding tool again and just pick more at it. So whichever way is easier for you. There are some pieces like this is already sticking up. I'm just gonna go ahead and peel that off with my finger, and then go around the tumbler and kind of repeat the process. So I like to just get a good piece to peel up, and then I just finish it with my fingers. You want to do this step very, very slowly and very carefully, because if you take your diamond or your vinyl and you rip it up very quickly, you might rip up the spray paint with it. So make sure you're pulling very slowly, and then whenever I pull the vinyl, I lift it and then I pull towards. So I'm pulling it towards this way. I don't want to pull up and then risk me peeling the spray paint with the vinyl. So I'm pulling and I'm not pushing. And I poke it with my weeding tool. I get a good piece popping up there. I take my finger and then I pull towards or away from the spot where it touches the tumbler. I don't want to pull or push because I don't want the spray paint coming up. So that was kind of fast. You see what happened there? The spray paint came up a little bit. That's okay. Diamond plate isn't perfect, and this is a homemade tumbler, so I'm gonna go ahead and pull all of these diamond pieces off of my tumbler, and then I'll be back. I am back with all of the diamonds peeled up from my tumbler. So here's the finished result before epoxying. I started peeling up the diamonds after the paint dried or was drying for an hour. To me, the paint felt dry. I did have to stop halfway through to run some errands. So I went out and I had to run some errands for about 2 to 3 hours. So when I came back, the paint was drying for about 4 to 5 hours. I will say whenever I came back to peel up the rest of the diamonds, it was a lot easier to peel up. Before, whenever I peeled up the diamonds after the paint dried for an hour, the paint wanted to come up with the vinyl. So I do have a spot right here. The paint wanted to come up with the vinyl. Whenever I waited the 4 to 5 hours, it was a lot easier and the paint wanted to stay more on the tumbler. So if you have a couple days to do this tumbler, if you have some patience, go ahead and let it dry for at least 3 to 5 hours and then maybe start peeling up your vinyl. If you don't have time, that's also okay. Go ahead and start peeling it up after an hour like I first started to. Just make sure you be very careful with ripping up the paint when it comes to peeling up the diamonds. My next step is going to epoxy. I am not going to seal this with Mod Podge, with clear spray paint. I am just going right into epoxy. I do not recommend applying a decal after this step, only because I don't want to risk the paint coming up from the transfer tape. I recommend doing that after you apply your first coat of epoxy.
Now we are going to epoxy the tumbler. I do have my face mask on, so I will be yelling at you. I do not mean it in a rude manner. I did mix my epoxy off camera. I will be posting a video on how to mix epoxy correctly. I mixed a total of 15 mLs of epoxy. That's 7.5 of part A and 7.5 of part B. Realistically, I probably will not use this much epoxy, but I wanted to have more than less. If you are applying a decal to your tumbler after you've applied your first coat of epoxy, I do recommend adding a lighter coat of epoxy on this first round. So I would probably add 10 mLs of epoxy to cover this 22-ounce tumbler. If you're not adding a decal and you're just going to leave it as is, you're just going to epoxy it once, I would typically add a thicker coat of epoxy. I'm now going to turn my cup turner on, and then I'm going to apply the epoxy to my tumbler. I will be posting another video in my description below on how you apply epoxy to your tumbler. I will be adding a decal to this tumbler, so I went ahead and just applied a very thin coat of epoxy. The amount of epoxy that I applied to this 22-ounce tumbler is about 8 to 10 mLs. I'm now going to let this tumbler spin for 4 to 6 hours. After 4 to 6 hours, I'm then going to turn off my turner and let it air dry or air cure for another 4 to 6 hours, leaving my drying time for 10 to 12 hours. The drying time differs for everybody depending on how thick or how thin of the epoxy coat you added to your tumbler. Once I have a total of drying time of 12 hours, I'm gonna put my tumbler to the side since I will be adding a decal. I don't like adding a decal to my tumbler until after 24 hours of the tumbler being dried or cured. The reason for that is because I don't want to risk the transfer tape ripping up the epoxy. After my tumbler has been dried or cured for 24 hours, I'm then going to add my decal to my tumbler and then go ahead and epoxy the tumbler right away. Once my tumbler is epoxied, I'll go ahead and I'll let that dry or cure for the same time that I let it dry or cure on this step. Again, my help videos will be posted in my description below for anyone who is a beginner who may need help mixing epoxy properly or applying epoxy to a tumbler. I hope y'all enjoyed this video, and if you did, please don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel for more tumbler and craft videos. Thank you guys so much for watching and for all the love and support you've given me in this past 4 or 5 months. It is greatly appreciated. And as always, thank you for watching, and I'll see y'all next time.